People who like to explore abandoned buildings. What was the biggest fuck this, I'm out moment you had while exploring? Found what looked like the remains of a pig, and it was wearing lingerie. Several years ago, a man was murdered in the city I was working in, and parts of his body were turning up at various locations. I think his hand and foot had been found, and a week had passed. I'm an architectural designer, and I was surveying an abandoned chapel that was slated to be renovated into condos. It was apparent that homeless people had been squatting in the chapel, but I wasn't sure how recently they had been there. When I went into the basement though, it was clear someone was either there or had just left, based on the smell. There were no lights due to the power being cut, and I didn't stick around long enough to see if anyone was currently occupying the space. 2 days later someone reported that they found the torso and head of the murdered man in a building attached to the chapel. I had been too freaked out by the smell in the basement to continue on to the attached building, but I'm almost certain I would have been the one to find the body. I walked into a old abandoned cabin in my neighborhood. I saw movement around me, and when I shined my flashlight to the walls there were thousands of roaches and spiders on the walls. I noped right out of there. As kids we would walk this 1/4 mile railway tunnel near where I grew up. There were no tracks, but it was next to 2 live tunnels so there was a slight element of danger. That and the fact it was trespassing I guess, and railway workmen or transport police could catch us at any moment. So as you can imagine it was dark, real dark in the middle, but towards the end there was enough light to barely see. One day we took an old school pal down there, and after walking the length, almost at the end of the tunnel, just as it was beginning to get light he stopped to look down a large uncovered square 3 feet by 3 foot manhole. No, he didn't fall in, but after a flash of brief confusion he took in a deep breath and screamed, then immediately started sprinting for daylight. Oh crap, frickin' ruin. He screams naturally without question we ran, having a hard time catching him up. At the mouth of the tunnel we stopped, all out of breath. WTF. What's wrong? What did you see? We asked. His face was pure white and shaking, barely able to speak. He said there was someone down there looking up at me. Now this buddy was and still is a good friend of mine, but back then he was known for not being the sharpest tool in the drawer. Instantly we had an idea what just happened, but slowly we returned to open manhole. Then as the 4 of us stood around this hole looking down, sure enough, reflected in the still water about 5 feet down this feckin' hole was our 4 faces looking back up at us. My friends and I went into the Gibraltar mansion in Wilmington, Delaware. It was cool until we came across a room with an older man squatting in it. He was terrified of us, and we felt pretty horrible, so we left after apologizing. This is not scary, but it's interesting story. My friend was walking in the forest and found old house. When he moved some stuff the ceiling broke and old German light machine gun fell down. Exploring an abandoned prison, part of the ceiling collapsed. It didn't hit me, but it was close enough to knock me over. I guess junkies used it as a place to shoot up, because I fell on an old needle. I got tested to make sure I didn't get anything from it, but it scared me enough to stay away from abandoned buildings to this day. Exploring an abandoned manor with some friends. We had been drinking and smoking, and thought it would be cool. The ground floor entrances were covered with bricks, so we had to enter through the first floor, 8 foot height, using an improvised ladder made of old trash and wood pieces. It was quite unstable and hard to climb, and we were 5 or 6 people. Being the only way out, and knowing how slow it was, I was on edge the whole time. We were exploring the floor, cool glass ceiling, lots of debris, but suddenly we find a room filled with plastic containers with pink and brown liquids. Some friends decide to explore the ground floor, which was pitch black, and involved going down a broken staircase missing several steps. They heard someone coughing in the dark, and feel several people moving in the darkness as our eyes get used to it. At this point I was hearing someone slowly walking in a room on the first floor, carefully stepping over the broken glass on the floor to not make noise, which was really creepy. We got the frick away, and on our way out we saw a roughed up man with bloodshot eyes leaving a shack outside the house and staring at us. I still shiver when I remember his look. Probably just some junkies living there, but for overly high 15-year-olds it was scary as frick. I've been many places in the tri-state area and have experienced floors that are decaying. Once almost fell. Thankfully was a very small drop. Needles, animal corpses, etc. One time at a prison in NJ I saw a cell that was decked out with a decorated dollhouse and you could tell someone was staying there. The creepiest experience I ever had was about 6 years ago. I was in an abandoned hospital in a residential part of New York City which had been abandoned less than a decade prior to our visit. Despite this, it was not a well-known location. We went at night and were exploring the second, third, and fourth floors all without issue and in total silence. There was little to no graffiti and everything was left patient records and tissue samples, medicines, medical equipment. As we reached the 4th floor, we passed a random room that said no explosive gases can be used in this room. I read the sound aloud, and we immediately heard a huge thud coming from inside that exact room. My blood ran cold, and I literally froze, because I felt that someone in that room was making themselves known. We ran out of there, and heard slamming doors as we went down all the stairs. I have not been back there since, and it's now been sold, and is being renovated into a housing complex. I still wonder what would have happened if we went into the room. We found a stack of old computers in an abandoned house on the outskirts of our town. When we opened one of the computers, it was filled with nothing but LDP0RN. 3 of the guys I was with ditched because they didn't want to get involved or convicted. I just called the police and they took them. There was a good 6 to 7 terabytes. Truly disgusting people in this world. Bit more context, I was 13 when this happened and had no idea what to do or who to call. I realized that I should have called child services, some kind of child abuse hotline, or reported to the police anonymously, but I was a young kid and was never told what to do in a situation like that. All I knew, that it was wrong and some kind of authority had to be called, and 911 was the only one I knew of. As 12-year-old kids, we were exploring the woods as kids do. The forest parted to an open field, and in the distance was an abandoned farm. Naturally we crept inside, and in one of the horse stalls were all discarded hypodermic needles and old food. Our parents were quite mad when we told them what we found. Wow, I can't believe I have a place to tell this story. When I was in middle school we went upstate in the summer. There was an abandoned house in the woods we explored. Top floor was pretty pristine, the beds were made, and drawers/closets shut with stuff neatly arranged inside. There were bats. The lower you went the more disordered. The basement/garage was in complete disarray. Books and random crap thrown around. Beer cans and used condoms. We went to the far end of the house where the wall partially collapsed and that's when we saw the bear. Foolishly ran with all our might. Thankfully the house between us and bear's lack of interest is why I'm typing this. Got busted by a soldier who told me, rather calmly, that the spot was used for training with real bullets and that I'd better get out of here before he drags my ass to the cop. The guy was really nice, took the time to explain why it was dangerous and send me on my way. I didn't insist. Weirdest part is we explored for 1 or 2 hours before getting busted and met no one. We weren't hiding or anything. I was looking around an old abandoned quarry near where they would process the rocks with a friend when we both hear something moving. He just blurts out hello, and a soft voice replies hecko. We ran. I do urban exploring quite frequently and nothing ever makes us leave instantly apart from dodgy floors or squatters. However, 5 years ago me and a few friends explored a derelict farmhouse without buildings, which had evidently been left for decades with the state it was in. After having a look around the place and finding nothing but empty buildings, we had a look inside what appeared to be an old stable. Inside was literally hundreds of empty tins of cat food, some nooses tied to a beam and a fairly new pair of scissors with a brownish crust covering the blades. The smell was putrid. We ventured further into the building and noticed on the flood was a cat's tail and a few cat's paws which had been dismembered and left on the floor. We swiftly exited, and on our way out a pickup pulled up onto the side of the farm, bearing in mind it was surrounded by woods and fields with no track leading to it, with 3 men stood in the bed. Needless to say we got out of there as quick as we could, and haven't seen or heard anything about it. The farm went on the market and sold earlier this year, so it would be interesting to see who previously owned it. Broke into an abandoned house in the village I grew up in England back when I was a teenager, maybe 15 years ago now. Was with a couple friends, but broke off by myself and ventured upstairs. When I turned at the top of the stairs I saw a figure standing in the darkness just staring at me. I bolted out of the building as quickly as I could, and my friends heard me and panicked. They weren't far behind. Went back there a couple of weeks later with a bigger group to prove my story, and to my embarrassment, it was a tall mirror at the top of the stairs. The figure I saw was me. Not my proudest moment. That's it for now. Thank you for watching the video. Leave your comments below. See you soon.